Hi, good evening. I'm Lonnie Stonich, the Executive Director of FAN, and I am so excited to welcome you to tonight's important conversation between Donna Jackson Nakazawa and Michelle Icard. Thanks for joining us. FAN celebrates its 40th anniversary this year, and we're honored to have the robust support of dozens of schools, nonprofits, corporations, families, and individuals from across the country. We are committed to our vision of an informed and compassionate community, and will achieve that vision by presenting fresh ideas that elevate minds, expand hearts, and make the world a better place. We have hundreds of videos of past events archived on our YouTube channel, so please be sure to subscribe to get updates when new recordings are posted. And now for some introductions. Excuse me. Donna Jackson Nakazawa is the author of several books that explore the intersection of neuroscience, immunology, and emotion, including The Angel and the Assassin, named one of the best books of 2020 by Wired magazine, and Childhood Disrupted, which was a finalist for the Books for a Better Life Award. Donna's work has appeared in Wired, the Boston Globe, the Washington Post, Parenting, Time, and Glamour, among others, and she has appeared on Today, NPR, NBC News, and ABC News. Michelle Icard, we welcome her back. We last had her in January of 2022, is the author of 14 Talks by Age 14 and Middle School Makeover. Her work has been featured by CNN, Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, the Christian Science Monitor, Redbook, Time, and People. Her leadership curriculum for middle schoolers, Athena's Path and Hero's Pursuit, have been implemented at schools across the U.S., and her summer camp curriculum is offered at more than 20 camps. And now let's welcome Donna Jackson Nakazawa and Michelle Icard.
Hello, Donna. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Lovely to be here with you, Michelle. I am very excited for this conversation. Welcome, everyone.
I feel as though my second grade teacher said you get to meet your pen pal today, because we have been getting to know each other over email and on social media, and I'm so happy to feel like I'm in a room with you, at least. So thank you for that. I'm ready to dive into this book, which I will say, I received an advance copy of this book from my editor, who you know as well. And she said, will you read this? And I said, yeah, sure, it sounds good. And I picked it up and I started reading it. And then I said, I gotta go get a pen. And I just started taking copious notes, because it is just chock full of incredible research. So let's start talking about kind of the state of the mental health situation among kids today. And you write about how there's this widening gap between how girls are doing and boys are doing. And I'd like to know if you can kind of set the landscape with what you learned through your research.
Yeah, so we've known for a while that across puberty, after puberty, girls are more likely to develop depression and anxiety. But even before the pandemic, we started to see that not only was the number of girls developing anxiety and depression growing, that gap between girls and boys was growing exponentially and in worrisome ways. We're also seeing that depression in girls is setting in much, much earlier, by 11 or 12 or 13. And to put this in perspective, by age 17, 1 in 3 girls reports having had a period of major depression, not just worry over finals or a breakup, but a period where they lost interest in their activities. And researchers said it's marked by a period of hopelessness, guilt, and unworthiness. And after the pandemic, during the pandemic, it was like gasoline on a fire, right? So in 2021, the CDC reported that suicide attempts among girls had risen 51% in 2021 compared to 4% in boys. Now, we care about all children. I'm the mother of a son and a daughter, I just like to say, and I love boys and I love girls. But over the past 20 years, mostly the last 10, this skyrocketing, rising rate of serious depression and anxiety in girls, doing events with children's hospitals, the number of girls in ERs who are sitting there because they don't want to live. So we have a crisis, and I wanted to dive into it.
And one of the things that I found so interesting about the research as we're thinking about this crisis, and we're sort of setting the stage for what can we do? So we'll get you there. If you're hearing this and you're feeling like, well, tell me, what do I do? We will get to that. But in continuing to kind of set the stage for this, you write about the fact that we've only really been studying the female brain since 2016. And when we used to look at, in terms of stress, how the male brain reacts. And I mean, I felt like that should say, since the 1800s, like back in the 1800s, they used to only look at men's brains, but 2016, talk to me about that. That's shocking.
Right. So while we have numbers or epidemiology on how girls are doing versus how boys are doing, what we didn't have was the biological examination, or which begins in preclinical research, and then it moves from there into translational and clinical research. So for a very long time, neuroscientists until 2016 wanted to keep those pesky hormones out of it. Right. So they were doing all their experiments in all their labs. And then in 2016, NIH asked, hey, let's start to look at the female brain and how it responds in stress. And let's look at the female brain and how this might interact with the development of mental health disorders. And wow, I followed 4 female neurobiologists as they began to look at this. And that research, because research takes a minute to get the funding to write the papers, really just started coming out in about 2 years ago. So this is a whole new understanding. And just like we found out that heart disease looks different in women, heart attacks look different in women when you look, it turns out the intersection of stress across health and development is different in girls than boys.
It's amazing. They were afraid of how hormones would impact their research.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so talk for a minute, if you can, about what you refer to as the sort of stolen year, the in-between years.
Yeah.
And what's happening. Put that into context for us around what's happening with girls.
Right. So those in-between years are what I refer to as kind of those ages of 7 to 13. And you know very well in your work how important they are. A lot is happening in the brain at that time. It's this huge developmental and neurobiological bridge, right, between childhood and adolescence. But so much is coming at kids much sooner now. These are no longer those years where you kind of hang out with your friends and figure out how to all get along, or figure out what your passions are, what you're interested in. It's now a time where everything is ramping up and coming to kids in a competitive and evaluative way. So it isn't just sports on the weekends and after school. It's club sports. It's getting up at 4 a.m. on Saturdays and driving 3 states away. It's, hey, starting to think in middle school about getting ready for upper school and college. And all of these things are evaluative and competitive and hierarchical. And we've added in social media, where everything is competitive and hierarchical and evaluative and judging. So those years where kids kind of were free to explore and develop their identity and their space and place in the community has now been replaced by a time in which childhood really doesn't exist. And this is especially true for girls, as we'll, I'm sure, discuss.
Yeah, I'm curious about that social media piece, because I know a lot of parents were really worried about that. And there's this feeling of like, well, what can we do? The beast has been unleashed.
Yeah.
And are we just like, do you have any words of hope or advice around how parents can be managing their kids growing up in this new climate where social media exists, and also the desire to still kind of give them a childhood? How do we balance that?
Well, one of the things I do in the book is really walk you through the science of what a kid's brain on social media looks like, so you can really see how it's changing the brain in real time and how this is linked, these experiences that girls face, particularly this excessive sexualization. And this really, social media has removed that line between being a girl and a woman, so that girls are liked more and get more TikTok followers if they present and sexualize themselves as girls. So one thing, of course, I'm sometimes called a science writer, and one thing I love about the science is that, at least for me as a parent and as a human on this planet, it helps me dial in to, okay, I really have to tackle this. Done a lot of work with pediatricians since the book came out, and many pediatricians tell me parents don't even have a conversation around social media in their homes because it slipped in, it changed our lives, and then it slips into the kids' lives. And we know that the average girl is starting social media around 8 or 9, and way before the brain is ready for this kind of social interaction. So in terms of kind of the hope is partially in the understanding of the biology, which we'll get into. But then I think we'll also talk about later building in these conversations and social media literacy in a way in family life, while knowing that even though it's hard to hold the line, you are actually doing something that is neurobiologically crucial to your child's development. So we can break that down even more as we go on.
I love that answer. I love it because you use the word conversation as though it were a tool, and I believe it is a tool, and I think it's our most valuable tool. And so often parents are like, I'm not equipped, but I didn't grow up with this. I don't know how to handle this. This feels so out of my depth. And you can say, you can have a conversation, right? That feels like a really doable thing for us.
Yeah. And you can say that. I don't really know how to begin here, but we don't want to brush this under the rug. There are hundreds of scripts in the book, hundreds, because I'll throw this in here, writing about neurobiology a lot. Guess what, guys? When it's a high stakes moment, your brain goes offline. And I've had parents now tell me that they taken bits of the book and little scripts and they put them on the inside of their kitchen counter, their kitchen cabinets. They go, well, let's just make a cup of tea. And because when something is really important, when we sense that something isn't quite right, when we know we want to help, but we don't have the words, scripts are a friend. And eventually they begin to change how we interact and talk to our children, right?
Yes, I'm clapping for that. I love scripts. And it's funny because people say to me all the time, I never remember the stuff that you said in your book. And I'm like, I don't remember it. I wrote it. I need to go back and look over and over. So It's okay to have a crutch. It's okay to have a script.
It's okay.
Okay, so social media is kind of one element of what I would say parents fear as a kind of toxic culture, right? That our kids are growing up in today. And I know that we are a group tonight who are from all over, but many of the viewers and the audience members tonight are from Chicago, where this summer there was a really traumatic event at the 4th of July parade, a shooting event, and guns and shooting have become a part of our toxic culture. And we as parents feel that in our bones. It's stressful and our kids are worried about that. So can you spend a moment talking about either that or just on a broader sense? In addition to social media, we've got gun violence, we've got social media. What are the components of a toxic culture that girls in particular are facing today, and what can we do to support them?
Well, first of all, to everyone in the Highland Park area, a deep bow, because this is a worry that we all have with our kids and that has now become our kids' worry, right? So Pew Research recently did a study, 60% of kids are afraid that their school will be the next site of a school shooting. They're going to school with that worry. And we also know, in reporting the book and talking to girls and pediatricians and school nurses and counselors, my goodness, we seem to have a lot of money for drills, for shooter drills, and not enough money for school counselors, so there's a whole sort of issue going on around safety in school, but emotional safety also, and addressing that emotional safety. In terms of our toxic culture, we know that we have, as I said, created platforms, so to touch on social media, where girls are facing 60,000 images a day, which are clocked by the brain, by the way, much more powerfully than words. Mm-hmm. So And they give girls this unreal image of female perfection, sexualize girls way before they're ready. We see girls, when we talk to girls, talk about scrolling, staring, and despairing, right? And so this in and of itself, over time, without everything else that I'm about to talk about, over time, even a super well-loved girl's sense of her possibility in herself will begin to diminish across time under this kind of toxic, competitive and evaluative culture. So and if you go to the wider lens, we have school shootings. The whole world, Michelle, is heating up, as we all know, environmentally, politically, socially, emotionally. Everything is just a lot hotter out there. The expectations academically are earlier, harder, faster. So kids never have a sense that they have a moment not to worry about adult problems. And we, the adults, haven't really done a good job of tackling the problems that we and our generation, not to blame any of us, but that have taken place on our watch. And so kids are really smart. Now, kids across development, the brain is kind of like a detective. Its number one job across development is to be a threat detective. Am I safe or not safe? That is the question the brain cares about most. And of course, it answers that question at home, in the community, and looking at the greater world. And the brain wires and fires up based on the answer to that question. And if the answer to that question is, I don't think you're safe, I don't think you're safe here, there, I'm hearing Dr. Seuss in my mind, or anywhere, then your brain, especially as you come into puberty, starts to wire up neurobiologically to be prepared for the next bad thing. And we don't want to see that. We don't want to see that, because when we do, we see changes in the brain and things called neural pruning that fire the brain up in ways that on brain scans look like depression and anxiety and hopelessness and a loss of interest in life.
Is that why we're seeing this widening of the gap between, well, maybe it's not why the widening of the gap, but the increase for girls and boys? Is it the state of feeling unsafe perpetually?
I think that there's a theory, not a theory, I would say a body of scientific literature. Here I'll quote George Slavich at UCLA, who is head of the UCLA Stress Lab, but also head of the program in California, which is taking $40 million to look at this intersection of stress and safety on neurodevelopment. And George is the scientific father of social safety theory, which holds that, look, across time, and this is true for all kids, and then I'll get into girls, but across time, if we travel way back in time to when we were hunters and gatherers, getting along with each other, cooperation, communication in that tribe was so crucial to your survival, because if you didn't have it, if someone was socially or emotionally dissing you, putting you down, rolling their eyes at you, those social and emotional threats in community pack a huge immune wallop. What do I mean by that? They get the stress response to flip on in ways that over time are really bad for the body and brain. And that's because way back when, if you were made fun of or ostracized, you went to the edge of the tribe. And you would be open to physical wounding by the elements, predators, other marauding tribes. You wouldn't get the good food from the fire, the tubers and nuts. And so social and emotional threats in family life, in school, on social media, in our culture, are clocked by the brain as a sign of physical danger now, because it was that way. And social media has only been around a very short time. And the world we're living in now, in all the ways we talked about its toxicity, our brain wired up way before we had this kind of fast, incoming, threat-laden world that we are in right now. And when it is social and emotional, the brain takes that super seriously and begins to prepare in ways that amp up the stress machinery.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I can really feel it. I can feel my 12-year-old self getting, someone rolling their eyes at what I was wearing and it feeling like a life or death kind of situation. Like who will protect me and take care of me out here? Okay, so what does the early onset of puberty do to all of this? Because this is a big piece of the book and the research. So talk a little bit about that piece.
So this is where we begin to see that new research that finally happened in neuroscience really truly come into play, right? Because we've talked about everything we've talked about is affecting girls and boys, although we do see much more toxic commentary on girls than we do on boys. So, but other than that, it's toxic for everyone. Boys are struggling too, of course they are. But as kids come into puberty, which is happening earlier, my God, puberty is 6 years earlier than it was in 1800. In 1900, it was 15, and today it's 11. So when we talked about shaving off childhood, those lost years, we're also talking biologically. Now, two things are really important to remember here, and this is a little for the nerds in the room, but I'll keep it very, very simple. Number one, when estrogen comes in, it is a stress amplifier in a really good way. So estrogen is this groovy hormone. It's a master regulator. Estrogen is your friend. It's the reason why women can do everything a guy can do and stay awake for 18 hours or 16 hours and do it all with smaller organs in a smaller body and still make room for a uterus. It's the reason why we have a bigger response to vaccines. However, in the face of unmitigated stress, the kind of stressors we're talking about, estrogen flips from an evolutionary advantage, which helps protect you, protect another life, to a disadvantage. And that added immune boost, that added stress boost is also the reason why more women have long COVID, for instance. More women develop autoimmune disease after puberty at 3-4 times the rate of men. In a healthy world, estrogen is this groovy thing that makes the female brain truly a human superpower. That corpus callosum, which basically connects the left and right sides of the brain, is bigger and richer. But in the face of stress, it amplifies the ill effects in biology of stress in a big kind of way, unless we mitigate and bring down that stress machinery. And as these toxic things rise in our society, including social media, we have to up our ways to bring down the stress machinery, especially at puberty. But here's the other thing. Adolescence used to happen before puberty. We want that. We want adolescence to happen here because we want the brain to go, well, what do I do when 2 of my friends leave me out? Well, what do I do if I failed that test? Like, what do I do if this bad thing happened to me with a boy at a party? Who do I turn to? How do I ask for help? How do I articulate my feelings? But now puberty is happening before adolescence. This rush is coming in of toxic stressors with the amplification of a good stress hormone that can flip to a disadvantage before the brain has wired and fired up in healthy ways to put any of this that we've spoken about in any kind of context, including how serious is it? Is it life or death? How do I ask my mom to explain this to me? How do I even voice that I am afraid?
Right. Okay, that is blowing my mind a little bit. I like that estrogen does that flip. I think that's super cool to know. But let's put some parents at ease. So
Absolutely.
we freaked them out. No, I know. They all know this. They are all embedded, deeply embedded in it at home. So everyone knows and everyone senses it and worries, and they are craving the antidote.
Let's do it.
Yeah, if we need to lower stress among girls and help them through these tricky in-between years, what do we do? Tell us.
Well, I really careful in the book to have developed 15 antidotes to the stress response. They're this ramped up stress response that are all very expert agreed upon, and we can run through a number of them. I think that one of the ones that it's always good to start with is really based on a study done by a team at Hopkins, led by Christina Bethel, who is the director of child and adolescent health there. And she did this very wide study, which found that the number one predictor of a child flourishing through adolescence was if you were able to answer yes to this one question: can your child come and talk to you about anything, no matter how hard? And it sets the stage for what we're trying to do here. Now I have tons of antidotes in the book, of course, that aren't just about how to talk to your kids. It's only one piece of it, but it really sets the stage for re-engineering the ways in which we connect with and communicate with our girls. So another body of work has shown that something called parent-child attunement is so crucial, which allows our girls to turn to us and talk to us even when they don't have the words. And so we have a lot of ways that we can build parent-child attunement. It's that sense of connection that is not built on our jumping in as the detective or the fixer or the judge. I will be the first to raise my hand, raising my daughter. It's natural as a parent, right? Like, you were the fixer, they fell down, they scraped their knee, you get out wash out their knee, put on some Bactine and a Band-Aid and tell them it'll be all right. But as kids get older and they're trying to figure things out more for themselves, jumping in is the absolute wrong thing to do. And so a lot of parents at this age really need help, as I know that I have needed help, to step back and learn how in your own body, to create a state of attunement and safety, because we can see neurobiologically when we learn these skills, which are not hard, they do take a little bit of work. The work starts with you. We can see children's brains, their amygdalas calm down, and they can find their words. So a lot of times we know that 90% of parents say they would know if their kid is struggling, right? That sounds great, except almost the same numbers say that they don't know how to differentiate ups and downs during these years from the sign that there is a problem. And we know that, I don't want to scare people, but half of parents don't know when their child is having suicidal ideation. So it really begins with us in terms of the work that we do to create a sense of safety within our grounding ourselves, shutting up, stepping back. And I'm sorry to come back to learning a lot of tools for difficult conversations, because here's the other thing. We want to know that we have the skill set when our daughter comes to us, and you're the expert on this, with hard things, we make it a good experience for her.
Yes,
and that means from her perspective,
right?
Not ours.
Right, because for many of us, just as you mentioned, our definition of a good experience is fixed it, told her what to do, good, told her how to solve it. Now I can check that off and go do the million other things that are on my list. And it's such an effort to not do that and to carve out the time to just listen, as you mentioned. I mean, again, listening and talking, we don't think of those as our best tools, but really they're so important. I love what you just said about make it a good experience for her. Do we know what kids think is a good experience for them?
Well, kids, so an interesting study showed that, so we think that the more we talk, the more we fix, right? Well, okay, I'll say I thought that. And it turns out that studies show that even when you say nothing, you just put your body and your gestures and your eyes in a place of attunement, or what we also call biosynchrony, with your child, kids spill more than they do with someone who's listening, even when that listener doesn't ask a single question. And that can be mind-blowing for parents. But remember what we talked about with the brain at this phase, right? In this developmental window and across adolescence, this is true with 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds. It takes time to figure out what's going on in there. And then, of course, we have to layer in more things like knowing how to respond when you hear difficult things, right? And knowing how not to jump in. So your child is telling you this really hard thing happened. What do I do? Maybe they even want you to fix it. Hey, I really, really want to tell you what I'm thinking, but I really want to hear what you're thinking, because what you think and feel right now is so much more important than what I think and feel. And building in these buffers so that the brain can, with our help, start to wire and fire up for resiliency.
I think that's so smart. It takes a lot of time and a lot of practice to get good at this, right? And so if we don't give kids the opportunity to practice when we're still a bit of a safety net, that's tough. Okay, so I'm wondering if this is what you consider an antidote, but it's a phrase that you use that I love. And so you encourage parents to wonder aloud together with their kids. Is that going to reduce stress in our girls and help them? Talk about that.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So the work of Alison Gopnik out at Berkeley, a philosopher, she writes a lot and talks a lot about how kids, as they're growing up, they have something we think of as a lantern light consciousness. It throws a lot of light in the room, right? And we grow up, and to be successful, we have a flashlight. We're like, I've got to do this, as you said a minute ago, and get it done and check. But when we start to school kids to have this flashlight like consciousness, they lose a lot of that kind of thinking that allows them to discern what's good for them and what isn't good for them. And so when we can start at a young age, or honestly start wherever you are, I don't care if your kids are 2 or 20, I tell you, doing these things makes all the difference. If we start to wonder with kids and take out our ideas, so often we're worried in this incredibly competitive world, are our kids going to make it? Are they going to succeed? I've got to, fill them with all of these tools and ammunition and get them in a place where they can get out there. But we take something away from them too. And if we start to change our language, I wonder what a bird feels like in the rain, or, they will start to, if we do this enough, they will start to be able to apply that to things like, I wonder why my friend Sarah sent a picture of her cleavage to Harry. And conversations in the family fall around wondering. They don't fall out around telling. They don't fall out around answering didactically. They fall out around wondering together. And then we can begin to apply this to social media, right? Like, I wonder, how is what is this person's life like in between the 87 photos a day? Or I wonder how this platform is making money. Or I wonder why it is that all the comments I see on Twitter or whatever are so angry. I wonder, how do they get to the front? So building in wondering really shifts the brain toward a place where eventually the voice inside your child is their own voice and not what other people their age are doing. I wonder if I want to drink at that party. It's a really important, and it's a simple tool. And there's so many of them like this. Again, we have to shift our thinking, right?
Yep, I love that. I love that it starts with the parents. And I think an important piece of this, especially when we're talking about this kind of wondering piece and the social media piece, is that wondering doesn't come with any sort of judgment. Like, the wondering is so open-ended that the answer, I mean, you're a science writer, so this is a very sort of scientific approach, I think, of like, what if we did this experiment, right? What if we tried putting these ingredients together? The wondering feels that way to me, in the sense of like, this is all hypothetical, and we're gonna just sort of play around with the hypothesis and not going straight to, oh, a picture of cleavage sent to Harry means this girl is this type of person, or feels this way, or has this kind of character, which that always, gets my hackles up. And so I like wondering, because it feels like it is a judgment-free zone and a real exploratory place to be, which I think is.
That is what we want. That is what we want to see. And in those lines also, we're in a culture where we really have a lot of evaluative comments about other people's kids, like, oh, well, she texted that, I can't believe it, or she's in therapy. Or as parents, we can get very competitive. And we have to remember that the brain at this age is really, really sensitive to evaluation, highly sensitive to evaluation. And we have to shift the way that we're talking to our children so that we're not being evaluative in general. I love that you brought that up. We're reassuring them. We want to be reassuring them all the time. It's their qualities, it's their values, it's their relationships, and their mental health that we care most about. And one thing that I say to parents is, the things that you're saying should be the kinds of things that are not, obviously, we all know this, not you were the best or you were the fastest, but the emotion of what you would want your child to remember you saying about them if you were no longer here.
Yeah. Do I want to feel that I'm the fastest, or do I want to feel that I sort of lit up her experience?
That's right. It's about how we make our girls feel. They are already more evaluated than boys, and women will be more evaluated their entire lives. You just have to look around at anything these days and you can see that the evaluation never stops, whether it's, too strident, too aggressive, too whatever. Girls know that they're going into this evaluative society when they're older. Let's not start it at home. And let's not like up the ante in terms of, oh, you're developing so fast. Oh, wow. We want to like really pull back on this idea of 8 and 9-year-old girls as being ready for adulthood. They are not.
I love that. I love that. So we're talking a lot about these tools and these antidotes. We've talked about conversation a bunch as an antidote. And you also mentioned the power of writing, getting girls to write about their feelings. And I think that's good, because I can imagine that we have people who are watching who are like, I don't have a talker. I wish my daughter would come to me and tell me about all of the things she's stressed about, and I could wonder with her, but she isn't going to do it. So talk about the power of writing.
Well, first, I want to say to those parents, that's okay. There's a lot in the book about all the different ways. I do hear a lot from parents, or I get the sense from parents a lot that moms especially feel like it's all on me. And that is not the case. Yes, it begins at home, all of these strategies, but as the book, as you guys will see reading the book, it builds out to all the things we want to utilize within the community to help us in this. And if your child is not talking to you, that's okay. That's really all right. There's so many other ways to go at this, and it's actually kind of normal. But one of the things about writing, and I'm biased, I'm a writer, you're a writer, and I also teach narrative writing at medical schools, universities, for therapists and parents. I teach narrative writing as a way to really deal with some of the big stressors in your life, and especially for parents of teens. So I'm partial to this, but here is one thing we can use with kids in narrative writing, which is just so successful. I have pediatricians doing this all over. So here's the trick. You ask your daughter to set her timer for 10 minutes, or set a timer for her. Hopefully if she's under 14, she doesn't have her smartphone, but just throwing that in there. And you set a timer for 10 minutes. If she wants to, It's optional. If she likes this idea, she writes for 10 minutes until the timer goes off, what we call expressive writing. You do not lift your pencil off the paper. It doesn't matter what you're thinking. It's not like school. Whatever comes from here to here on that paper in those 10 minutes, it doesn't even matter if she's writing about how much she hates you. All the better. If she is, it is her worst, most negative feelings that she has ever had and is having in this moment. There's one rule in those 10 minutes. She may not write negatively about herself. That is not allowed. As angry as she might be with her friends, her teacher, her coach, her parents. And then at the end of those 10 minutes, and you will not run to the trash can and try to put this together, she rips it up into 500 little pieces. She can flush it down the toilet if she wants to. And then you set the timer for 10 minutes. Again, it's optional. And she writes about how she's made meaning out of the experience, what she's done before that's helped her in this situation, who she can talk to about it, how she might ask for help if she needs help, what characteristics she thinks she has for dealing with this situation, and what she will learn about it long term. And then she can rip that one up so that she's not afraid of her parents running in the trash can and going, you said you'd call your teacher. You know, this is about your child. This is expressive writing. And the thing that's so powerful about it is we see the stress machinery just go poop down. It is 20 minutes. Anyone can do it anywhere. You just have to make sure your child trusts you enough that they know that you aren't going to ask them a single question afterwards.
So this is when you see stress. This is like, I know that this isn't like your kid comes home from school and you say, it's 4 o'clock, it's time to do your writing activity.
No. This is a stress machinery downshift. And it's a really fascinating thing. And we have a lot of really good research on it. And not only that, it works kind of similarly in the brain to meditation, which we know is so good for kids, only it operates in the past because you're thinking about the past. You're in the present moment doing something which actually looks like meditation in the brain, but you can always reflect back on it in the future. So it's a really cool brain tool is what it is.
That is super cool. I'm wondering about these antidotes. We're talking mostly about girls, but I know that we have parents with us tonight who have sons. You and I both have one of each. And so do these work for boys? Are there things we need to do? Talk a little bit about what parents of boys can take away.
Yeah. So as I said before, boys are really, really struggling. And there's a lot of toxic masculinity out there. We know my son hopefully will never hear this, but he was one of those kids who went into high school as the smallest boy and he came out the tallest. It was painful. It was painful. And the toxic masculinity, you know, I remember him coming home and saying to my husband and I one day, I don't care if I don't have a single friend. I will not talk about girls this way. I will not do it. I'm not going to do it. And he had a little sister and me for a mom, you know, and just, so that is also a way in which we see boys getting shamed and bullied. And we reward boys in our culture, right, for being manly, which usually means not that nice to women or aggressive sexually toward women in some way. And we laugh at them for being unmanly, caring about a girl's feelings or wondering how to make the world better for girls. So in the book, I do talk a lot about how a lot of these strategies are obviously for all children, boys, girls, anywhere on the gender spectrum, right? But because of the sexism that we see additionally dumped on girls, we know statistically that girls are much more likely to be the victims of sexual harassment and sexual assault or rape. So I really wanted to take a special view at how we help girls. But if we apply these antidotes to helping boys, we will help girls, right? Because helping boys means helping girls and the women they will become. And honestly, if we want to make the world better for one child, if we feel we need to do that, we want to make the world better for all children.
Yeah, that's so good. And it's sort of a rising tide kind of thing for, you know, for all kids. And so I really like that. And I think the more we sort of normalize these antidotes and these conversations with all of our kids, the easier it is for everyone. So I think that's
The
really well
easier
put.
it is for everyone. If we, let me put it this way, I'd like to say we don't need the science to do anything,
Mm.
that we wouldn't need it, that we would just go, wow, these rising numbers of depression and anxiety in girls and boys, that's enough. We better really figure out how to rewrite everything that we're doing with our children. But sometimes we need the science to get us catalyzed across all our levers of power, whether as a parent or a teacher or coach or anywhere that we are with children, to begin to say to ourselves, hey, the old strategies, they're not working. We
Right.
would not see these rates going up if everything that we thought we knew was working.
So how do we, you write in the book about sexism and sort of the need to reverse engineer
Oh,
the
yeah.
lens through which we are viewing this, and that's huge. I mean, that's a giant thing to want to do and a noble thing to want to do. But how do we change our culture's sexist lens on girls? How do we do that?
Well, the first thing that we really have to do is help girls make the essential leap that the problem is not inside them, it's inside our society. And how do we do that? We start with our own responses to sexism in family life, in community life. I want to put a caveat here. Everything I'm about to say in terms of this antidote is assuming you are safe, you and your daughter are safe, right? If you aren't safe, then these do not apply. But in a safe environment, to be able to call out even the smallest sexist remarks as they happen. Let's say in the book, I write about, sexist uncle, right? He's over and he's watching the basketball game and says something which all women have heard, oh, she'd look better in a bikini than, whatever. Be really quiet. Say, what? I was just saying she'd look a lot better in a bikini. I don't know why I'm doing this voice, but anyway.
That's how sexist uncle sounds.
Yeah, that's how sexist
uncle
sounds. Says it again. What? Says it again until it's clear that you as a family or a community don't accept that kind of thing. Or maybe you come back really hard, well, what do you think? What you think? Oh, you think that's sexist? You're so sensitive. Well, hey, that's what people say when people are being insensitive. They call other people sensitive. There are dozens of these in the book. And what I began to see and learn from the girls I followed was that when they could incorporate these kinds of rapid responses when safe, when they came into situations with boys and men, it began to make them very much in a place where they were not internalizing the sexism in our culture. And so there are dozens of ways to do this in our daily conversation. Well, sexist uncle is going on and on and on. You can literally say, your daughter's name is Jane. Hey, you know what? Jane and I are too busy knocking down this crap patriarchy to sit here and listen to this right now. Get up and walk away. Another thing is that we have good studies which show that half of girls don't feel comfortable talking to their dads with having big opinions with their dads. Now, if you're a mom, you know that probably your daughter has no trouble coming at you with her big feelings or opinions when they're different from yours. But many girls don't feel comfortable doing this with their dads. And so we want to see in the home, within limits, that girls are able to blow off at their dads. Like, let your daughter walk out of the kitchen and say, that is the most sexist, stupid, ridiculous thing I've ever heard. So we're just trying to internalize that voice so that when they go out there on their own, they recognize it when what is happening is not okay.
It takes it out of them feeling like they need to internalize that piece of our culture. And I can imagine that there are dads watching tonight, I hope, who are working really hard to sort of establish this rapport at home where, they're raising girls who feel like they can speak their mind. And I love that. I love when I'm at an event, and especially when we can look out and see dads in the audience. And I'm like, oh, things are really changing from 20 years ago when you didn't have dads in the audience when you talked about stuff like this. And now there's so many dads coming to webinars like this. And
I love it. I love
can
it.
imagine the positivity that example creates if the dad says something to crazy uncle. Like, that's pretty good.
Even better. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay, we are at about time for our Q&A. Tonight has flown by.
It always does.
Yeah, so I think Lonnie is going to come back in, and I've seen some questions come through. So I just want to thank you for talking with me before we switch.
Oh gosh, I enjoyed it so much, and we knew it would go by like a minute, and I don't know how it felt for everyone else, but I could talk to you all day. But
Yeah.
after hours.
After hours.
After hours.
Michelle, thanks as always. It's such a great interview. We appreciate the energy that you bring and the thoughtfulness with your preparation. We're very grateful. Donna, lots of great information. Of course, folks want to chime in. There's a lot of things that they're curious about. So let me also give a couple announcements here and some clarifications. It looks like it was just brought to our attention by someone in the Q&A. We did not know this before, which is that the bookstalls, the link we've been putting for the bookstall purchase, Bookstall's event page, for reasons I'm sure they will be red-faced about, they did not include, they have the whole event, they have the whole description, but then they're missing the final block at the bottom that says purchase. So I know, I'm like, oh, they're going to be unhappy when they realize that. And we did not, this is like event 115. I think it's the first time that's ever happened. I did not check it myself. So when someone brought it to our attention, so what I did is I went to the bookstall's website and I found, like, if you're just going to buy Donna's book. So that link, we've been putting that link in now. You can see it if you have it in chat right now. We just fixed it. I know that you will get that. You'll be able to get it back. So sorry about that. For those who are kind of stymied. So we do apologize for that. A reminder that those who are buying a copy of the book, you will be getting from the bookstall. I'm fairly confident this is still working. Now I'm like, now, of course, now I'm wondering. But when you get your receipt from the bookstall, in there is a link to register for after hours. Everybody who's at after hours, we're going to do a buy one, get one free. So if you buy a book and you come to after hours, we're going to be doing another giveaway in after hours. So be able to get 2 copies of the book, give one to a friend, give one to maybe another mom or dad that you know that could use some help. Give it as a gift, give it to your daughter, perhaps even, who knows? So thanks so much. I want to just clarify that a little bit. Sorry for those who are inconvenienced by that. So now jumping into some questions. Let's see. So we have here, there was a question put in about fathers, and it looks like you kind of came around to that a little bit. Maybe one more clarification on that. Donna, would you have any suggestions for how fathers, are there particular approaches that the fathers would have in talking to their children or talking to daughters about any of these topics? So you kind of gave good advice to the mom about let the daughter do this with the dad, but do you have any direct advice for dads on the Zoom?
Well, every single thing that I said about creating that parent-child attunement is not just for moms. Every single thing that we talked about, this has to be going on in both parents, right? This isn't about, can a girl come to mom about anything? This is, can a girl come to either parent about anything? And what's so beautiful about that is that we see girls, and Michelle, I don't know if you see this, but we see girls shift from, okay, I am in a certain phase, I'm going to my mom with everything. Well, now I'm in a slightly different phase, or maybe I'm thinking more about how I am, in terms of what I want to do with my life. And we want to know that a girl can call mom or dad 24/7 and get that same sense of parent-child connection and attunement. So yes, we want dads to be doing this work as well. And when we see that, we begin to build a sense of safety in girls, that there's always going to be somebody, right, that they can go to with really hard things. And the world today is really, really hard. It's really hard. And knowing that you have 2 people who have your back that way and who have the communication skills, it's a boon for life.
Thanks. We do appreciate that. A couple of this also came in ahead of time, but also for tonight. Hani is asking, why can't schools begin to teach girls about these coping mechanisms? So can you talk a little bit about the role that schools can play in terms of helping to shape some of this, how girls are managing anxiety and other things? Go ahead.
Well, I am doing a lot of talks at schools. Also, we are starting to see a movement of schools actually doing something that I think is really, really cool. We know that we have a shortage of school counselors all across the country, and not enough for the number of kids who want to talk to someone. So some schools are actually setting on the site of the high school a therapist's office. And so this is a place where kids can go in and get some CBT or DBT skills. In no way are all the things that I just talked about trickling down at this point to the average, conversation with a counselor, but I think they will over time. We're working on a program right now that I hope will help with that, but the book just came out a few minutes ago.
Thanks. I appreciate that. I did just put in chat too. So if anyone is having any difficulty with that whole book purchase thing, and I apologize. We usually have a pretty seamless operation here. If anyone has a difficulty, just forward us when you get your receipt from the bookstall, forward it to us. I put it in chat here. Just send it to info@familyactionnetwork.net. All those emails come directly to me, and I will be sending out the after hours registration link. So help is on the way. We're sorry for the clumsiness of it. We certainly do regret that. We're not known for our clumsy, so we apologize in advance. So we also have another question here. I think some folks are feeling a little bit, and what time we were at 7:58. So this will be the last question. Maybe talk a little bit about the role of grandparents. There is a lot of, we've had authors come in talking about, and experts talking about the role of grandparents and kind of the role of wisdom. The piece, well, I won't get into all that neuroscience, but maybe talk to us a little bit about grandparents and their role.
Yeah, so I love studies. I'm a science writer, but we have really great evidence that having two non-parents in your life who have your back, what we call benefactors, people with whom you feel safe and seen and known and valued unconditionally outside of parents, is one of the strongest predictors for flourishing. And often it's grandparents. And having interviewed thousands of people in my life as a journalist, I could tell you how often it comes down to a grandparent who saw a child for who they really are, took that time with them, and made them feel that sense of security. So I think, as you said, you have experts to talk about that, but I would just say darn tootin', absolutely 100%.
Okay, good. Well, Michelle and Donna will both be at after hours. We will work around any difficulties you have. A reminder, you can reach out to us at info@familyactionnetwork.net. We will solve any problems that anyone is encountering. Michelle, again, thank you so much for your efforts. We really appreciate it. Donna, great work. We can't wait to talk a little bit more and drill down on some of these topics. So thank you, everyone, for coming